So it's finally official. Boruto has consigned himself to death at the hands of a momoshiki takeover. Or has he? See, we saw in chapter 19 the end of the conversation between Boruto and Momoshiki that was teased all the way back in chapter 25. And in this conversation, Boruto and Momoshiki come to the agreement that Boruto would hand over his body to Momoshiki if Momoshiki lended Boruto the entirety of his power to be used in combat against the Shinju, and more specifically, Jura. And after all of the Shinju were gone, Boruto would hand over his body to Momoshiki. At which point, Momoshiki would probably try to take over the world. Now, if I'm being real, this hardly seems like a great deal for Konoha, because even if the world is rid of the Shinju, its greatest defender then turns into its new greatest enemy. And thus the world now has to deal with a threat that's almost as powerful as Jura, but now no longer has a fighting force nearly as powerful as it had in the battle against Jura. And yet it seems as though that Boruto's current plan is to have Kawaki kill him, or I guess kill Momoshiki, once the Shinju are defeated and Momoshiki takes over his body. But based off what we know from the fight that was revealed in chapter and episode 1 of Boruto, none of this makes sense. We very clearly see Boruto, not Momoshiki, fighting Kawaki. So how does this event come to pass? Do Boruto and Kawaki decide to have their final fight before killing the rest of the Shinju? Is some kind of deal struck between Boruto and Momoshiki? Or does Kawaki pull the highly nefarious move of fusing with one of the Shinju in order to acquire enough strength to be able to kill Boruto? Well, those are the questions that we're going to be trying to answer today, because today we're talking Boruto's final fight reveal. But before we get to revealing anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you're looking for one additional NC Hammer 23 video every single week, guys, you can go ahead and find my Naruto reaction series using the fourth wall link in my description below. But before we get into all that, today I want to talk to you about our favorite recurring sponsor to the page, Zocdoc. Guys, it's 2025. Those days of going to the doctor only for emergencies are over. No more waiting until walking it off for 6 months doesn't work. Night sweats turn to all-day sweats, or in my case, a hyperextension from carrying too many puppies stops you from being able to use your right arm for a couple of months. It's time to take our health seriously and get things checked when we need to. And Zocdoc makes that easier than ever by helping to find the right doctor quickly and easily. See, Zocdoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare high-quality in-network doctors and click instantly to book an appointment. And with over 100,000 healthcare providers, be it from mental to dental care, urgent to primary care, Zocdoc will help you see all of your options in one place. And you can search and filter through these healthcare providers depending on what's important to you, whether that's the insurance they take, their location, their availability, whatever helps you get to the healthcare provider you're most comfortable with. And once you find the right doctor, you can instantly see their availability. Click a time slot and boom, appointments made. And appointments made with Zocdoc happen quick, with most happening between 24 and 72 hours. And more often than not, you can even get same-day appointments. So stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to Zocdoc.com/NCHammer to find and book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/NCHammer to take charge of your health today. This message is sponsored by Zocdoc. So, the current plan is for Boruto to work alongside Momoshiki to gain as much power as possible to be able to defeat the Shinju. After which, Boruto signs over his body to Momoshiki, at which point he hopes that Kawaki is strong enough to be able to kill him. And not only is Momoshiki aware of this plan, but Momoshiki has agreed to it, telling Boruto that even though he plans on Kawaki killing him, Momoshiki will ensure to kill Kawaki before he gets a chance to do the opposite. And we have no real reason to believe that Momoshiki's intuition is anything but correct here. As in chapter 29, it was also revealed that Momoshiki and Boruto are able to read each other's minds. And therefore, unless Boruto has some kind of ass-pull jutsu that allows for him to block certain thoughts from being read by Momoshiki, like how Nagato had a jutsu that shut off his mind from being read by those who were able to probe into it, like Inoichi Yamanaka, then it stands to reason that Momoshiki is painfully aware of anything Boruto is trying to do. And this idea that Boruto does plan on having Kawaki kill him after Momoshiki takes over his body is most likely a big part of why Boruto has been trying to ensure that Kawaki is as strong as possible. And see, because it wasn't within Kashin Koji's 10 paths prediction for Kawaki to step in and help in the battle against Jura. In fact, Kashin Koji wasn't even aware that Boruto had gone to talk to Kawaki about his limiters. And while some of you are saying, oh, but Nikki also needs Kawaki to be strong enough to defeat the rest of the Shinju, Boruto himself is taking some pretty major steps in terms of acquiring as much strength as possible to be able to eliminate the Shinju. And while yes, having Kawaki there is obviously a huge benefit. Right now, Konoha has two incredibly powerful defenders. When Boruto is gone, it'll only have one, and therefore the strength of that one remaining defender is incredibly important, because a 1v1 battle against Momoshiki will be undoubtedly Kawaki's hardest battle yet. And we know that at some point, because of Chapter 1 and Episode 1 of Boruto, that Kawaki and Boruto face off over a leveled Konoha, that this fight is coming. But is this a fight between Momoshiki and Kawaki? I think not. But how does that make sense? How are Boruto and Kawaki fighting without Momoshiki being involved? I mean, it stands to reason that if Boruto and Kawaki are fighting, then the Shinju are gone, right? They currently have a truce, which has them fighting on the same side of the battle against the Shinju. And therefore, it stands to reason that in order for that truce to be dissolved, that the other side has to be gone. The Shinju have to be eradicated. But as we learned in Chapter 28, once the Shinju are gone, once Jura is dead, Boruto should be taken over by Momoshiki. And therefore, this battle between two brothers should actually be Kawaki trying to kill Momoshiki. But everything that we've seen from Chapter and Episode 1 of Boruto displays pretty openly that the Boruto we're seeing here is not Momoshiki. In fact, it's patently obvious that it's Boruto, just Boruto. He yells at Kawaki for going too far. He says that he's still a shinobi, and he activates his karma marking, which makes the situation all the more confusing, because right now we understand that Boruto can only use his karma marking with the explicit consent of Momoshiki, because if he tries to use his karma marking without the consent of Momoshiki, Momoshiki is able to take over his body. But in Chapter and Episode 1, Boruto even goes so far as to activate his right eye's dojutsu, which in the manga looks like a Byakugan and in the anime very much looks like a Jogan. But we learned in Chapter 29 of Two Blue Vortex that this right eye is seemingly the Byakugan of Momoshiki. But this activation of his right eye's dojutsu implies the highest level of cooperation between Momoshiki and Boruto. The level of cooperation they have right now. See, because in the manga, there's only 2 times we've ever seen Boruto activate that right eye dojutsu. That's in Chapter 1 of Part 1 of Boruto, almost 10 years ago, and in this most recent chapter of Two Blue Vortex, Chapter 29. And we learn that the only real reason that Boruto is able to use Momoshiki's Byakugan is because Momoshiki is frantically trying to allow Boruto to defeat their enemies, because when Boruto is successful in this endeavor, Momoshiki is free. But if all of the Shinju are gone, and therefore Momoshiki should be freed by the time that the events of Chapter 1 are happening, then why is Momoshiki still cooperating with Boruto? It makes no sense. There is no universe where Momoshiki and Boruto enter into a Naruto-Kurama-like relationship. Momoshiki is an irredeemable mass murderer who's wiped out several planets. And well, yeah, Kurama's definitely got blood on his paws. Kurama wasn't born evil. Kurama was born a protector who was forced into terrible situations and had his power abused by the worst of humanity. He was a force of nature that the worst amongst us used against their own. He wasn't a person making conscious decisions, but rather a weapon put into the hands the most powerful. The same, however, cannot be said for Momoshiki. In the same vein, there is also no universe where Momoshiki and Boruto make a deal to work together to take out Kawaki. Well, yes, Boruto understands that Kawaki is a little lost, and that the actions that he took to protect Naruto were wrong and misguided. Boruto still very much looks at Kawaki as his brother, and as such, he looks at Kawaki as somebody he trusts and loves. If Boruto was truly desperate to defeat Kawaki and save his own skin and come back to Konoha as a hero, then he wouldn't have told Kawaki how to get his limiters off. If Boruto was genuinely worried about Kawaki killing him one day, he wouldn't make the only person who was able to kill him maybe stronger. On top of this, if Boruto did work with Momoshiki to defeat Kawaki, there'd be effectively nothing between Momoshiki and bringing about the destruction of the world. Because if Kawaki is defeated and incapacitated, all Momoshiki would need to do is take over Boruto one final time, grab Kawaki, and sacrifice him to the Ten Tails, which at this point would probably be back to its original form, or at least like no longer Jura. Worst case scenario, Momoshiki has to fly around and collect all 9 of the tailed beasts. But considering the fact that that was his initial plan when he came to Earth, I don't think he would be too inconvenienced by that idea. So if it's not Momoshiki that we see in the first fight against Kawaki, there's no way that Boruto and Momoshiki ever become friendly, and there's no universe where Boruto and Momoshiki work together to take down Kawaki. Well, then what is happening in Chapter 1? Well, One of two things. And while I could honestly see either of these two scenarios coming to light, the second scenario does seem a bit more likely to me. And thus, let's go over the less likely possibility first. See, the first possibility is that when Kawaki and Boruto have their prophesized face down on the ruined faces of the previous Hokage, the reason that Boruto is still in charge of his body is because technically the Shinju aren't gone yet. But how? Or maybe more importantly, why? Why would these two decide to take their attention away from the Shinju and focus on their rivalry, when there's still a threat like the Shinju looming out there, threatening the safety of Konoha? Well, maybe the threat isn't out there, and rather the threat's in here. That is to say that I believe that there is an okay chance that in order to guarantee a leg up in the battle against Boruto to come, rather than killing Jura, Kawaki decides to fuse with him. See, while we all understand that Jura is a humanified version of the Ten Tails, many people have speculated, myself included, that he has something to do somehow, some way with either Jigen or Ishiki. And while his goal for consumption may not be Kawaki, it was originally Naruto, and then his attention was shifted to Himawari because he's actually after the Nine Tails chakra, and this can be explained away by saying, well, he's the Shinju version of the emaciated Ten Tails, of course he's going after Ten Tails chakra, because after all, Kurama was made from a Ten Tails, because if he was able to consume Kurama's chakra, he would regain the majority of his strength back. But there's an equally valid argument to be made that the remnants of Jigen/Ishiki that existed within the emaciated Ten Tails that later became Jura are seeking revenge against the entity that gave Naruto the power to be able to defeat them, Kurama. But at the end of the day, whether or not Jigen or Ishiki have anything to do with Jura doesn't really matter all that much. What matters is that he is the Ten Tails, a technically unkillable creature with unlimited potential and a long track record of being sealed in Naruto's angriest people. It's not crazy to assume that in one final ploy to try and get as much power as possible, Kawaki, rather than destroying the power of the Ten Tails, decides to take it for himself. And this would fit perfectly within Kawaki's character arc, as over the course of Two Blue Vortex, we've seen Kawaki shaking down Amado for as much power as possible, even though Amado warns Kawaki if he keeps pushing his body, eventually it'll break. But also, if Kawaki were to take the power of the Ten Tails for himself, he would ironically become the thing he hates, as becoming a pseudo Ten Tails Jinchuriki would complete Kawaki's ascension to a full-blooded Otsutsuki. But would he be able to do this? I mean, we know right now, because of how much power Kawaki is demanding Amado place in his body, Kawaki's body is at its limit. It's becoming highly unstable, already achieving the max potential of what it will be able to accomplish through artificial means. And in classic Naruto fashion, these artificial means are not enough, but here's the thing, they'll never be enough. The biggest talking point all throughout Boruto is that power that is bought will never measure up to power that is earned. We saw that put on display in the very first arc of Boruto, the versus Momoshiki arc, and it's still as relevant in that arc as it is now in Two Blue Vortex almost 10 years later. But Kawaki hasn't pushed the envelope as far as it can go. There needs to be a breaking point, a final line that Kawaki has to cross to show just how truly desperate he is for power. Like Sasuke using Shibaku Tensei on the 9 freed tailed beasts at the end of the Fourth Great Shinobi World War in one final desperate push to try to kill Naruto. And that moment for Kawaki could be him doing something eerily similar to what we saw from Sasuke. But rather than stealing the power of 8.5 tailed beasts, he would simply have to take Jura's power for himself. Now, if this happened, it would not only be the point of no return for Kawaki, but would also absolutely give him an amount of power that would be able to defeat really any version of Boruto, which could make the final battle between the two brothers very, very interesting. It would also have the added benefit of technically keeping one of the Shinju alive, so that Boruto could retain control of his body. It would also make the line from Boruto in chapter 1 when he tells Kawaki, "I can't believe you've gone this far," make a lot more sense, because Boruto could be talking about the fact that he can't believe that Kawaki would push his body to this limit simply to get rid of the Otsutsuki, as joining with the powers of the Ten Tails is only something that an Otsutsuki, the clan that Kawaki swore to eradicate, would do. But there is one problem with this theory, and that is, as sad as it might make you, Boruto's going to have a happy ending. And there's really no way, if Kawaki does take the power of Jura for himself, that Boruto ends happy. See, if Kawaki were to fuse with the power of the Ten Tails in an attempt to get a leg up on Boruto, there's really only two possible outcomes. And those outcomes are Boruto wins, the Shinju are technically eliminated, Momoshiki's able to take over Boruto's body, and then haul off either Kawaki's unconscious or dead body off to some iteration of the Ten Tails after it either re-manifests if Kawaki is killed, or after it's put back together after Momoshiki catches all 9 of the tailed beasts and jams them into one big tailed beast ball. At which point Momoshiki is now able to feed a 100% Otsutsufied Kawaki to a Ten Tails and create a chakra fruit on Earth that destroys everything and everybody on the planet. Or the second possibility is that Kawaki wins and kills Boruto, which is technically, when you consider these two outcomes, the better of the two. But neither of those two scenarios would really put a whole lot of smiles on the faces of any of the manga readers. So I believe what we are actually seeing in episode/chapter 1 of Boruto is Boruto's reawakening. See, we know that Konoha gets destroyed somehow, some way, but Momoshi, regardless of how stupid he gets, and Hidari are too afraid of Jura to lay a hand on even a single building of Konoha, which leaves Jura the strongest person in the Boruto universe right now. However, fortunately for Konoha, he's taken an interest in their city. He believes there is much to be learned from it, scientifically, from a jutsu perspective, architecturally, paleontologically, I don't know. Can you tell I'm sick? Anyways, Jura is so obsessed with Konoha that he believes destroying it in any facet would be like burning the Great Library of Alexandria. And therefore it stands to reason, since none of the Shinju want Konoha destroyed, and none of the people who are from Konoha want Konoha destroyed, that it won't be the fight against the Shinju that destroys Konoha. And therefore, since the only other fight that we know happens for sure is Boruto versus Kawaki, Konoha must be destroyed in that fight. But how? Well, it's rather obvious. Well, yes, the Shinju don't want Konoha destroyed, and most people from Konoha don't want Konoha destroyed. You know who does want Konoha destroyed? Momoshiki. And you know who is on record saying they don't care if Konoha is destroyed so long as Naruto is safe? Kawaki. So it only seems logical that during a battle between Boroshiki and Kawaki that takes place after the Shinju have been destroyed, that Konoha is level. But then how is Boruto in charge of his body and able to use his Kama marking and right eye dojutsu in chapter and episode 1 of Boruto? Well, it must have been some kind of reawakening. See, because, well, we have been disputing the authenticity of the Jogan on this channel as of late, because in chapter 29, Boruto used a Byakugan in his right eye and not the Jogan. And considering the fact that in the manga we haven't seen him use his right eye dojutsu since chapter 1 of part 1, where the dojutsu that he's using not only looks like a Byakugan but isn't specifically called the Jogan, I do still believe that at some point in Two Blue Vortex the Jogan is going to be revealed. And I believe with the power of said Jogan, Boruto will not only be able to re-cede control of his body from Momoshiki, but will also be able to keep Momoshiki in check while still accessing his power. That is to say that the Jogan will operate as a way for Boruto to use the power of Momoshiki while keeping him suppressed. Therefore, when Boruto tells Kawaki, "I can't believe you've gone this far," it isn't referring to Kawaki's current level of strength, but rather how far Kawaki went to kill Boroshiki, i.e. him leveling all of Konoha. See, in this moment, Boruto is seeing for the first time the results of the battle between Boroshiki and Kawaki. A battle that Boruto entrusted Kawaki to complete. And thus this seems to explain why Boruto and Kawaki are already roughed up, even though in chapter and episode 1, they seem to be just beginning their fight. And it's because Boruto's body and Kawaki have been battling for a while now. Now, there is also a universe where both of these possibilities happen simultaneously. Kawaki takes Jura's power for his own and then battles against Boroshiki. And while that would kind of be my ideal scenario, for some reason Kawaki getting another upgrade just feels like slightly unlikely. I think there's like a 45% chance it could happen. But anyways, I'm curious to hear from you guys. What do you think's happening in chapter/episode 1? Do you think that Boroshiki and Kawaki destroyed all of Konoha with their battle, or is something else at play here? Let me know in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to drive to the Anime IRL studio and film more stuff while sick, so yay.